Welcome back to the Rules of Engagement. We just did analysis on Polt versus Creator. We're now going to be on to the Q&A. So our first question is going to be from Chris. And it says, are Nidus Networks, Zerging run-bys, or Overlord drops the best option for harassment for Zerg? So if you're only going to do one, Zerging run-bys. There's never, and if as you get to later game, your larva count gets up, especially if you're good with injects. You always want to do tons of Zerging run-bys. Just cram them out like a maniac, right? Definitely against Protoss and against Terran. And one thing that I think a lot of people haven't used yet in HOTS that's going to be really awesome is you can use those speeding run-bys, right? But add 1 or 2 Vipers. Just because Vipers are fast, they're air, they can circle around and join the speedings, because Blinding Cloud will really help out against a bunker that's behind depots. It'll help out against cannons. It'll help out against the Nexus cannon. Or it'll help out against the Planetary Fortress, right? You can run into middle line, Blinding Cloud the Planetary Fortress, and it can't shoot unless you're right next to it. So, Zerging run-bys are awesome. Overlord drops and Niduses can work too, but you're using gas, and it's a little bit riskier. Zerglings are cheap. The Vipers, you can, if you want to use those in late game, try to sneak in a Viper too if they have a lot of static defense to really help the speedings out deal with those. But speeding run-bys are your go-to if you have to pick one. Next question is going to be from Julian O'Neill. I can't choose what race to stick with. I like taking the game slow with a good defense without having to worry about too much about pushing. So playing like slow macro, building up to your ideal army. Terran is the best race to turtle with because you've got bunkers, planetary fortresses, and siege tanks. And your late game, you can do pretty well with Ravens and BCs. It's kind of a slow-moving army. The trick with that, though, is it's very easy to get out-expanded. So that can be a little tricky. Protoss can work pretty well, too. You can play Protoss, get a lot of photon cannons, right? For some reason, most players find it a lot easier to spam photon cannons than they do to build more planetary fortresses or more bunkers. So Protoss is great. You just spam a ton of photon cannons, and you mass air as well behind that Tempest primarily and Psystorm. Zerg is a little bit trickier. It's still very good for turtling, but yeah, it's the micro is tough, right? Your Zerg turtle army is going to be Vipers, Swarm Hosts, and a lot of stack defense, Spores and Spines. And the Spores and Spines, you got to move them around to make the most use out of them. The Viper micro is very important with that composition. And deciding where to send Locusts, right? To choose your ally points. So there's a little, it's very, very strong, just as strong, I would say. But the micro is a little bit trickier. So if you had to pick one, I would say go with Terran. Try a little bit of Protoss, but Terran overall siege tanks are great for playing it slow, and then go to battle cruisers, because battle cruisers are awesome, right? Who doesn't like battle cruisers? Another question is from the same person, Julian O'Neill, and it says, if I want to play Toss using mostly Phoenix and Warp Prisms, I think that's what it means, what should my game plan build be? So, if you want to use a lot of Phoenix and Warp Prism and stuff, the goal is you first get a fast expansion. Don't try one base play. Don't do it. Fast expansion, one get Expo, Nexus first, and Deforge. You know, those are all fun. Then you get your Stargate. You get your Phoenixes, and you harass with Phoenixes. And while you're doing that, unless you're, Grandmaster, you're going to be building up some extra resources because you're microing the Phoenixes so hard. So 2 things. Make sure you constantly build probes and pylons. If you build up extra minerals because you're not spending it, that's where you go around and build extra Nexuses and cannons. That's where you get the Warp Prism. Once your minerals get high, you get a bunch of Warp Gates and you start warping in Zealots. If your gas gets high, you can slowly take the Storm, but for the most part, harass with Phoenix. When your minerals get high, take more expansions and throw down a lot of cannons at them. And that's a really fun way to play Phoenix and Warp Prism. You gotta use a lot of cannons, though, because, of course, you're not gonna have that strong of a defensive armor. That wraps up the Q&A. Thank you guys for watching Rules of Engagement. We'll be back again tomorrow at 5 p.m. for the finals of the 2v2 tournament. Following that will be another episode of Rules of Engagement. And remember, next week, next Monday, the WCS North American Qualifiers kick off. We're going to be broadcasting those from the studio all next week, so that's going to be really fun. Stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.